we reached the last chapter, chapter 16 in Tractate Yevamot. We're going to deal today a lot with statistic, numbers. What is the real number and what is the just made up, somehow, a number. Especially when it's come to this serious halachic decision, because we are talking here about a situation of a husband that left for a journey and not return, and how you treat it. So we are on page 119. Isha shalach ba'ala vetzarata limdinat hayam. Okay, so there is a married woman. The husband have another wife. They call it here the rival one. Okay, and he left with the rival one for overseas trip. You hear that, Gilbert? Why are you looking at me? Look at the Mishnah. That's what is written here. Now, what happened is that they don't have sons, they don't have children, right? When he left. Now, the problem is, she is basically in need for levirate marriage if the husband pass. The problem in that case is, it may happen that the co-wife, the rival one, while they are on a trip, there may be a child. Right? So here's the story. Right? So again, the husband and the co-wife left for, let's say, Kathmandu to Nepal. Right? They are gone for a month. And then some witnesses came to her and said to her, your husband is gone. So the Mishnah said, "Lo tinaseh velo tityabem ad sheteda shema mu'uberet hitzarata." She is in a limbo, right? She cannot get married, and she cannot have levirate marriage with the husband's brother, the surviving brother, until she have the clarity if the co-wife is pregnant or not with her husband. Why? Let's think together. If that co-wife have a baby with the husband, then the wife is no longer for need for levirate marriage. Right? So since you have this safek, this quandary, so meanwhile she cannot marry to anyone, because maybe the husband died childless and she needs to now to have ייבום with his brother. Now, she cannot do ייבום yet. Why? Because maybe the co-wife is pregnant. And if she is pregnant, that is sureshet ach. That's the prohibition of marrying the wife of the brother. So later Rashi said, Gemarrah explained why she is not released by the chalitza. Why? Especially, even we go to the next step. And let's say, if she knows that the rival one, the co-wife, is pregnant. So, according to the way the Meiri tells us and others, she basically cannot get married until the co-wife of the child. Why? Because there is a concept, it's called nefel, that the baby maybe will not survive. There is a period of 30 days, right? We have pidyon haben when the baby is ready, right? They pass this period. The 30 days period is the time that we are not sure what's going to happen, if it's going to survive or not. So therefore, this period called nefel, nun pei lamed. Now, the next step, if the husband pass, no children, no brothers that she knows, but here is the problem. Hayta la chamot. She have a mother-in-law that live overseas. So what's the problem? If she knows that this is the husband who have his only child, That's one thing. But if there's a potential to have her mother-in-law pregnant with another child, so Rashi tells us, Rashi said, התלמוד דכל מעל ילדה צרה בין זכר ובין נקבה מפיק לה למער היבם, אבל חמות דינם ילדה לא זקיק לה לאח, אלא אם כן ילדה זכר וכולה היה חושב שם ילדה וזכר היה. So Rashi said to go so far that her mother-in-law is pregnant, and she pregnant with what? With a baby boy. So that's something that we said, אינה חוששת. She can go ahead and marry. We're not going so far. יצתה מלאה חוששת. But if the mother-in-law left while she was pregnant, so the daughter-in-law is concerned that she maybe have a baby boy. If that happened, then she need to have ייבום, so she are stuck now and she cannot get married until she knows unequivocally that what? That the mother-in-law have a baby but is not a boy. Rabbi Yoshua אומר אינה חוששת. Rabbi Yoshua said don't worry about it. Why? He says it's predicament within a quandary, meaning it's like the concept of svek sveka. You have, number one, you understand that the mother-in-law is pregnant, but maybe she miscarried. And even she have a baby, it may be a female. So therefore, Rabbi Shua said that so far, leave her alone. Let her get married. Clear? Mm-hmm. Almost 30 years ago, hard to believe, when I got married, right? So I remember they made for my mother-in-law a special garment, a special, clothing, because she was pregnant with my brother-in-law. Mm-hmm. And not just that, I think it was 3 years after we got married that she had another baby boy. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. My mother-in-law celebrated several years ago her 70th birthday. Listen to this. Kenai Horit, food. Mm-hmm. Okay? She have 11 kids. 10 by her own and 1 adopted. And when she celebrated 70, actually it was 71, I think. Anyway, it was 70 or 71. She told us that she have now 70 grandchildren. Mm-hmm. 70. Can you imagine? Mm-hmm. Was gehört, David? Anyway, so it's a situation sometimes when people get married very young, that the mother-in-law is pregnant. Right? I'm not going to say the joke. I just implied a famous story. What's the difference? You know the story. When it's come to a wedding between some frum and non-frum. Did you ever heard that? So it's a frum family. So the mother-in-law sometimes is pregnant, right? There, if it's a non-frum family, they said sometimes the bride is pregnant, right? Right. But if it's a non-Orthodox wedding, sometimes the rabbi is pregnant. Anyway, you don't call it rabbi, right? Anyway, my hitzarata. So the Gemara said, what is the meaning of the Mishnah that said that maybe the tzarata, the co-wife, is pregnant? What does that mean? Hakamash melan, they come to teach us, lehatzara hu dechayshinan. This specific co-wife, this rival wife, we are concerned. She was left with a husband for overseas. Aval letzara charite lo chayshinan. You understand the story? Yeah. That he left with his other wife, right? So for her, we concerned that maybe she's pregnant. But if this guy, he may find another one over there. And maybe with another one, he have a love affair and married, who knows, and have a child. Which means the wife have more than one tzara. Right? So she wants to know what's going on. Because if they have a child, she's no longer befitting, even if she wished to have a Levirate marriage with his brother. Right? Prohibited. So the Gemara said here, oh, you may think that we should concern with this guy. Right? So we said, that's so far. We don't worry. Because if you worry of the concept of Eshet Ach meaning that his brother will marry with the wife of his brother, this is, we call it in the rabbinic language, En hadayan dan, el lefi ma she'einav ro'ot. We go by the way we see it before us. And the way we see it before us is there's a rival wife, a co-wife, and they left, and that's what we know. If she's not pregnant, etc., that's the end of the story. If he had more and marry more while he was on vacation or whatever, on a business trip, and have another wife and she's maybe pregnant, this is too far. Clear? Next, we learn the first in Mishnah, Lo tinaseh velo tityaber. So if she's stuck in this situation, poor wife, guess what? She cannot get married. She's stuck right in a limbo. She cannot marry and she cannot have a Levirate marriage. So the Gemara challenged that and said, Bish lama yabumei lo. I understand why she is prohibited to have ייבום. The dilma mi abra. It may happen that the rival, the co-wife, is maybe have a baby, and therefore it's Eshet Ach shelo bimkom mitzvah. So pag'a be'eshet ach deoraita. It's a biblical prohibition against marry the wife of the brother. Leviticus 18. Ela lo tinaseh amai. Why we say that she cannot get married? If you are concerned that the rival wife, the co-wife, was not in a pregnancy while they're away, so halech acharov nashim. Let's talk statistics. We have a guy that knows statistics here, right? So you go by the majority of the women. Verov nashim, most of the married women, mitabrot veyoldot. They get pregnant and they have a normal child. So therefore, usually you go by the majority. That's the famous Gemara in Tractate Yevamot page 11. You go always by the majority. So since the majority, they get pregnant, so this rival one is one of the category. Tosfot in 37 ask a question, a famous situation that the couple got married 10 years and have no children, etc. So it's the notion of getting divorced because they need to have children, etc. But here again, the way that Tosfot tells us, and Tosfot Rosh too, they said that here we talk about again normal case of less than 10 years. Leima Rabbi Meir hi dechayesh lemiuta. We may go by the avenue of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir have a very exceptionally different view. He said, I understand your notion that we should go by the majority. However, he said, based on Gemarrah in Chulin, page 6, he said it was a group of people, big liars. They tried to be part of us. They called the Kutim. And then it turns that they are idol worshippers, they are no good, they are liars, and we have a lot of problems with them. Okay?
It was destroyed.
Right, so we are concerned about the wine that is yain esech, etc., etc. So they put a decree, no matter what, minority, they are all, the same category. Every kuti is maybe one of that. That's Rabbi Meir's view. And Tosfot have a discussion in several places if that concern of Rabbi Meir is biblical or rabbinic. But here, if you follow that avenue, that this wife cannot marry outside, so maybe the rival one, the co-wife, she is one of the mi'ut. one of the minority that did not get pregnant and babies, but according to the majority of the sages who disputed Rabbi Meir, and they said that we always go by the majority of you, so why she allowed to go and marry outside with the assumption that the rival one have a baby overseas? You mean to say that the Mishnah, our text in the Mishnah, is not a practical halacha, because the practical halacha we follow the sages. Disputed Rabbi Meir and the hold that we always go by the majority. That's what Tosfot tells us. So the Gemara responds, said, Afilu teima Rabbanan. You can even say that the Mishnah follow the opinion of majority of the sages who disputed Rabbi Meir. Ki azle Rabbanan batar ruba. When the sages follow the majority, what does that mean, majority? Ruba de itei kaman kegon teisha chanuyot. This is something we study several places. If you remember, we studied it in Psachim, page 9. It's in Ktubot, page 15. In Chulin, page 95, and many places. You have a street. You have an avenue. You have 10 stores. 9 of them are kosher, and 1 is not. And is a piece of meat was found on that street. Now you ask a question, Mr. Statistic, okay? Do you say that that piece of meat is kosher or not?
If
Right?
most of the butchers are kosher
9 out of 10.
Yes.
in the area, 9 out of 10, you say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So so if it's correct, if it's the 9 selling kosher and 1 said not, you go by the majority. The same apply verov Sanhedrin. You have the Sanhedrin, which is Sanhedrin Ktanad 23. You have 12 judges that go one way. You have 13 judges that go the other way. What do you do? So the Gemara said in Sanhedrin, page 40, you go by whom? You go by the majority. So therefore, it's called Acharei Rabim Lehatot. We go by the majority. So here we derive
A
Binyan Av.
majority of like a Sanhedrin of Amaroim can overrule a Tana.
Basically, no. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. No. But here we use it as a Binyan Av based on the Gemara in Chulin 11. That any time you have the majority, even a small majority, you go by the majority of a minority. It's rare cases, but in a few cases it happens that Amoraim rule over, but most of the cases not.
But if you have but in order to do that, you'd have to have a majority of a Sanhedrin of Amaroim to overrule a Tana, right?
It's not, the Sanhedrin, it's not Amoraim necessarily. The Sanhedrin meaning that we have two forms. We have the 23 and we have the 71.
Yeah.
So here we said when you have 12 versus 13, even if it's the majority of
No, I
one
understand
vote.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
I know. I understand
So
the
it said,
majority. I was
"Aval
just
Ruba Deleite Kaman." So here you talk here about most of the women, and this is a statistic. Now think about the sages and how they think. Lo az leRabbanan batar ruba. The sages not go by the majority. What does that mean? If there is in Hebrew you call it rov mispari and rov statisti. What does that mean? If you go by the majority of just the dry numbers, you go by the world population, you go by the sample of statistic, or you go by just by the number of what you did, because statistic, as you all know, can change in a second. Many times people have a certain agenda to make certain statistic, right? So here, when you talk about 9 stores, so you go to 2 categories. You have 1 store that's selling non-kosher, and 9 of them said kosher. So we have the assumption that this comes from the largest group. But here, if you are not sure if the rival wife was pregnant or not, it's not because it's 2 different categories. Meaning that there are some women that get pregnant and some not. That because you can compare a general situation to this individual. Furthermore, how do you know that that's the true situation, that most of the women pregnant and have babies? It may happen that it's not correct statistic. Okay? So the Gemara rejected it and it said, "V'harei katan v'ktana." Harei katan u'ktana. But when you have a situation, you have a minor boy and a minor girl, so they are in a situation of waiting for Levirate marriage. Deruba deleita kamani. That it's the majority that's not before us. Ve'az lerabanan bataruba, and the sages go by the majority. V'tanya katan u'ktana lo choltzim v'lo miyabnim divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said, you don't leave a minor children to do neither ייבום nor chalitza until they reach the age of maturity, which is what? For a boy is 13 years of age and the girls 12 years. That they also show on their body a sign of maturity. אמרו לו לרבי מאיר, the sages respond to him and said, יפה אמרת שאין חולצים. You are said beautifully and correctly that they don't perform a manner of chalitza of relief. Ish ktiv b'parasha. The Torah said in Deuteronomy 25 verse 7, Ve'im lo yachpotz ha'ish, if the man does not wish לקחת את יבמתו, to take his potential to be a wife, right? Sister-in-law, to teach us that Ela ma tam ein miyabnim. So what's the real rationale that the minor boy or girl cannot do ייבום? So he said, Amar lahem, Rabbi Meir responded and said, Katan shema yimatze saris, uktana shema timatze ailonit. Guess what's going to happen? This boy, he may reach the age of maturity and turn to be saris. Saris, as we explained in the past, you have the issue of testosterone, all kind of physical issue. Cannot have children, same her. Ailonit is a woman that cannot have children. Okay? ונמצאו פוגעים בערווה. So all the marriage is basically in advance known that cannot be for perpetuate generation to have children. So therefore, it's you're marrying a wife of your brother when it's not involved with manner of levirate marriage. So Tosfot challenged that and he said that it may change. It may change that he is now like that, but he can change when he grew up. Or the Chazon Ish in Kuf Kavav in 126 elaborated and said, how do you define something that it's pertaining to the future while you don't know? You have to judge just by the current one. The Rabbanan that challenged Rabbi Meir and said that this minor boy and girl allowed to do a levirate marriage, and you're not concerned that maybe when they grew up they have those disability of saris or ailoni. Savrei, the hold here, zil batar ruba dektanim. You go by the majority, and what's the majority? Verov ktanim lav sariseinu. Most of the children, even they not reach an age of normal cohabitations, but the way that Hashem created them, most of them are born not sarisim. And they said, zil ailoniot ninu, ורוב קטנות, בתר רוב קטנות, ורוב קטנות לאו בני אילוניות נהנו. So it's not like the way sages said, that most of the minor are not ailoniyot. So it's not a question of having children. אלא מחברתא מתנית דין רבי מאיר היא. So you have to go, the Mishnah follow Rabbi Meir, but according to the sages, she can go ahead and marry. So you should know that this is according to Rashi and some Rishonim, but there are those who strongly oppose it, and we're going to study it in the next daf. So the Gemara asks, "B'mayu kimta." So how do you dealing with the Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah? Ke Rabbi Meir, you go by the Rabbi Meir, who was what? He's holding that we are concerned about the mi'ut, about the minority. Ema Seifa. Let's go to the last clause of the Mishnah. Hayta la chamot. Remember what we said? She have a mother-in-law overseas. And the husband, meaning the son of the mother-in-law, her husband, passed with no children. And there are no brothers when the mother left them. Okay? So imagine, the guy, let's call him Reuven, he married Tamar. The mother of Reuven, her name is Sarah. Sarah left to Holland, okay? And the son went over there to Holland. And when Sarah left, she was not pregnant. The husband, she is informed that the husband is gone. Since the mother-in-law left and she was not pregnant, אינה חוששת, she, meaning Tamar, is not concerned that her mother-in-law is pregnant with a baby boy and she's now need to wait to have a ייבום, but she allowed to go ahead and marry. Amai, why we're not concerned about it? You remember the story in Genesis with the Yehuda and Sheila and Tamar, right? הלך אחר רוב נשים, ורוב נשים מתעברות ויולדות. If you go by the majority, if she's capable, most of the women can have children. מיעוט מפילot. You have a certain small number, statistically speaking, that have miscarriage. God forbid, the babies, right? וכל היולדות, and all those women that deliver a babies, מחצה זכרים ומחצה נקבות. Assumption is that half male, half female. I mean, because if you go by the statistic, you have to go first by those who report. And you have to go by, usually the statistic go by race, by location, etc., etc. Many countries, it's very hard to do statistic, right? So you just go by general numbers saying half male, half female, which statistically can be incorrect, right? סמוך מיעוטה דמפילות למחצה נקבות. If you attach the fact that the minority of women miscarriage to a half, which we just said, that have delivered a baby girl, והבולי מיעוטה. So together is a minority. And the Ritva added to that, and he said, if you add to that addition those women who cannot have children, meaning they try hard and they do not have children, he says that's such a relatively small number that they don't take it even to under the consideration. Alright? So therefore, if you tell me that the Tana of the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, Leichush, so you shall be concerned with that minority, and therefore you should prohibit that woman from marrying outside, because it may happen that the in-law have a baby, and maybe that baby is a male, and therefore she needs to wait to have a ייבום. You understand the question? So let's repeat it for the guy who walked in, because he's involved with statistics, so make sure that everyone understands. We have the assumption that the minority of the women miscarriage. We have the assumption that half of the babies are male and half of the babies are female.
That's right.
Why? Because the truth is, when you do these statistics, how you deal with those third world countries? How do you deal with, they're usually dealing with race, location, etc., etc. Here you go by the double, triple predicament. One, you have the assumption that there are some very minute, small number, women that they cannot be pregnant.
Right.
Then you go the next step, that's the Ritva. Then you go the next step that say that there is a minority, the small number that miscarriage. Then you go by the rest, you say that it's half male, half female. Because how you determine that.
No, statistically that's correct, demographically.
But wait. Statistically, it's again, you can challenge the statistic.
Well,
because if you go by countries, you have some statistic, I assume, that some countries you have way more female or way more male, etc.
Yeah, I mean, worldwide it's like 51-49 female to,
so you see,
to male.
So the rabbis come in and said, if you go by 50-50,
yeah.
And if you go by the minority that miscarriage, and if you go by the few very, very minute minority of those women that cannot be pregnant at all, so you should be concerned with Rabbi Meir, because you adds up, and you said, oh, you should not allow her to marry, because it may happen that the in-law is pregnant, and it may happen that the in-law have a baby boy, and if the in-law have a baby boy, then she needs to wait for her future to be brother-in-law to do either ייבום or chalitza. So the Gemara said, Dilma, it may happen, כיוון דאיכה זכה לשוק, since the widow is legally presumed to be permitted to marry a man from a general public. Why? Because since her husband had no known brother. So therefore, lo chayish. So Rabbi Meir is not concerned about the minority. So he hold that it's okay. So Gemara said, wait. Reisha di echazek li ייבום tityabem. So he said in the first part of the Mishnah, the first clause. So when he said that the widow is legally presumed required to have a ייבום, a levirate marriage, because the husband have no children. So she should be permitted to enter the ייבום without concern that her rival wife might have given birth. אמר רב נחמן אמר רבא בר אבוה, רישא דאיסור כרת חששו, סייפא דאיסור לאו לא חששו. We talk about it many times. There is gradations level. Karet, that soul shall be cut off. This is a very serious matter. So here we said, okay, if that's the case with איסור אשת אח שלא במקום מצווה, marrying the wife of the brother when there's no need, violation of Leviticus 18, Torah violation, that soul should be cut off. This is something we should be very concerned. Versus Isur Lav, which means that the idea of if the mother-in-law have a baby boy and therefore she, meaning the daughter-in-law, cannot marry, that it's but in a sense is a light violation of negative commandment. So therefore, the whole idea of לא תהא אשת המת החוצה לאיש זר, chapter 25 of Devarim. So it's like one of those things that the person who violated receive malkot, lashes. It's not karet, the same as אשת אח. So לא חששו, the rabbis is not in that concern. So Rava rejected that. אמר רבא, מכדי הדאורייתא והדאורייתא. מה לאיסור karet, מה לאיסור לאו? They're both biblical. Why you differentiate between love and karet? אלא אמר רבא, so they said 119b, רישא חזקה לייבום ורובה לשוק. So here you go by the Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah is a legal presumption that it's the widow is obligated to enter to ייבום, but the majority is actually permitted to marry in a general public. So it means v'chazaka lo adif ki ruba, which means when you have this ruba v'chazaka, you in general you see in nidaitin that you go by ruba adif, but here he said chazaka lo adif ki ruba, and he said ve'aite mi'uta demapilot. As we said, that it's a very few minority that miscarriage, meaning that it's still an issue that a co-wife not deliver a child, so it's still in the manner of a framework of ייבום. Smoch la chazaka. So you have two entities here. V'havalei palga ufalga. So you have now the balance of and a half, because those who be scary detract from the strength of the majority, statistically speaking, right? Causing it to be equal in legal significance to the legal presumption. So as a result, the ruling is that she shall not marry any man who is not her Yavam, לא תינשא ולא תתייבם, and shall not enter to levirate marriage either. How about the Seifa? Seifa חזקה לשוק ורובה לשוק, והבל לזכרים ומיעוטה דמיעוטה, because you have here the minority and it contradicts the legal presumption. ולמיעוטה דמיעוטה לא חייש רבי מאיר. Rabbi Meir is not concerned about the minority of the minority. So here it's important to know that this disputation between Tanakam and Rabbi Yeshua, they have several avenues. There is a Rashi, there is a Rashba, Ritva, Meiri, Tosfot. They have a big disputation over understanding this machloket. What exactly the halacha? So is one school of thought that said, since the mother-in-law left, if she was pregnant, she left. So according to Tanakama, she cannot marry, the daughter-in-law cannot marry outside until she know clearly that the mother-in-law doesn't have a baby boy. There are other school of thought. Because the holy here, as Rabbi Akiva Iger tells us, and so many others, the Rambam and others, say that it's in so many ways is a sfek sveka mitapech. It's a
quandary within a quandary.
Quandary that can go both ways. Anyway, I wish to have more time. Lo tinaseh velo tityabem. So the Gemara said, U'la'olam nebech. This broken-hearted woman. Guess what? She's so stuck. She cannot marry anyone and she cannot have ייבום. Why you don't ask her, as we said, simple. Make chalitza and release her. And let her go and that's it. Because if you tell me that the tzara, the co-wife, is pregnant and everything, אמר זעירי לעצמה 3 חודשים. You remember we talk about regular almana, regular widow, she needs to wait 3 months. Why? Because we always say that it's maybe she's pregnant from the husband, okay? Even the Meiri said if she doesn't have a co-wife or anything like that, right? But here it said lachaverta tish'a. The other co-wife, she needs to wait 9 months. Why? Because maybe the other one is pregnant and the chalitza is not exempting her. Vecholetzet mima nafshach. Meaning after the 9 months of the time declaration of the passing of the husband, and it's clear that the co-wife is not pregnant, or she never get pregnant, or she miscarried, or she have already a baby. So anyway, she can go either do chalitza, or if she have a baby, the other one can go out even without chalitza. However, Rabbi Chanina disputed, and he said, le'atzma shlosha. For those concerned relating to herself, she must wait 3 months. Lachaverta leolam. But if it's talk about the other one, the other wife, so she wait indefinitely until it's verified unequivocally whether or not the wife gave birth. V'tachalot mima nafshach. But in any final consequence, she needs to do chalitza. Whatever happened after 9 months. Abaye Baravin Rabbi Chanina Baravin Amet Ravayu. The reason that the sages put this prohibition of chalitza even after 9 months, gzera shema yeh vlad bain kayama. Maybe the co-wife have a real normal baby, ונמצא אתה מצריכה כרוז לכהונה. So now you promulgate, right? You publicize publicly that she is not chalutza and she permitted to kehuna. So therefore, they don't want to do that. Because the sages put a decree that chalutza, she is equivalent to divorcee. And therefore, by rabbinic law, she is prohibited to marry kohen. That's what we study on page 24. So that's apply when it's hafkaat zika, but not here. Anyway, so the Gemara said velitzrecha. So let's make this broadcasting publicly, right? So they said dilma ika de'ave b'chalitza v'lo ave b'achraza. Maybe there are people who are there doing the chalitza ceremony, but they are not there when they put the declaration. The amre and these people will say, קשרו חליצה לכהן. Oh, the thing that the rabbi is changing the rules, right? And they allow chalutza to Kohen, which was not. Tnan, we learn on page 118, if you remember, a person who had no children, and he went with his wife overseas, and he have a brother, nitan li ben b'mdinat hayam, if your wife said, I have a baby boy overseas, ואמרה מדני ואחר כך בעלי, my son passed, and then my husband, you remember we studied it? מת בעלי ואחר כך בני, אינה נאמנת, וחוששים מדבריה וחולצת ולא מתייבמת. So the Gemara said, ואיכוש דילמה עטו ידין ואמר כדאמרה. Maybe she have witnesses that affirm her statement, that the husband passed before the son, and therefore she is exempt from both ייבום אין חליצה, ונמצאת המצריכה כרוז לכהונה. How you allow her to do that before you know clearly that she is not in need of chalitza? אמר רב פאפא גרושה. We talk about a situation that she is divorced from another husband before she married this person, and therefore she is already retroactively from the early part of her life, she is prohibited to Kohen because the Torah prohibited divorcee to a Kohen. So even we find later that this chalitza was not necessary, she still cannot marry a Kohen because of that status she had earlier in her life, and therefore the whole point of promulgation is not applicable. So therefore you're allowed to do chalitza even before you have the retroactive understanding of her status. But if she's a widow that not divorced from the previous marriage, so therefore we come to conclusion, that's the key point, that she is prohibited to do chalitza until we know clearly that she in need of that. That's the way the Mishnah said. Another interpretation of Ravuna Amar, the Mishnah speak about situation be'amra, while this woman gave her testimony, she said, Ani vehu, meaning my husband and my son, nachbenu bam'ara. We are hiding in a cave when they pass, which means I'm the only one who knows how they passed. So since we don't have a concern, this part of her testimony, that the other witnesses come and contradict what she said, so therefore you cannot ever refute the matter of chalitza. In the previous perek, page 117, that there are 5 categories of women that we cannot take their testimony in regards to the passing of the husband, because it may happen that there is a hatred involved, etc. So the same manner, we cannot take the witness when it's come to a brother of the husband in order to exempt them from ייבום. So one of them is יבמתה, which means the wife of the husband's brother, and they said שתי יבמות. They returned the 2 יבמות, meaning the 2 wives of the 2 brothers with no children. They returned from overseas trip. זו אומרת מת בעלי וזו אומרת מת בעלי. Each of them said, my husband passed. Different husband, right? זו אסורה מפני בעלה של זו וזו אסורה מפני בעלה של זו, because each of them have the same status of יבמות in the brothers. לזו עדים ולזו אין עדים. One of them have a witness, one not. את שיש לה עדים אסורה ואת שאין לה עדים מותרת. Because the witness are basically, they reaffirm the statement. Now we said, לזו בנים ולזו אין בנים. If one of the children from the husband, one not, and each of them give a testimony that the husband is gone, את שיש לה בנים מותרת. The one who have children is no problem, she can marry anyone outside. ואת שאין לה בנים אסורה, because she needs to wait, maybe she needs ייבום. נתייבמו, meaning they testify that the husband passed and they do ייבום with the brothers, ומתו יבמים, and those brothers passed with no children, אסורות להינשא, because each of them should be concerned that maybe the husband of the other one is still alive and she needs to do ייבום. רבי אלעזר אומר, הואיל והותרו ליבמים, הותרו לכל אדם. רבי אלעזר said, since you permit them to those יבמים, they are permitted from then on to marry any man, because their statement taken together indicate that neither one is obligated to enter into a levirate marriage.
ויחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי